welcome to the GoBundance Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Gruber, and today we welcomed in a multifamily investor, multifamily coach, and GoBundance brother, Michael Blanc, a guy that I've followed over the years since he puts out a lot of content around buying multifamily and syndicated, things that I've gotten into in my investing career. So great conversation. It was a real pleasure for me to meet him. And this interview was pretty chock full. Actually, it went a little longer than I was expecting it to because we got into a lot of interesting topics. You know, we started out with how he quit his job one day without telling his wife, just kind of came home, told his wife, hey, I quit my job, just so you know. And she wondered, you know, you're going to tell me this or we're going to consult? And he explained exactly how he was able to do that. So really interesting discussion point there. We also talked about how he built businesses going all the way back to the days when he had restaurants and he was completely passive for a while before the recession sort of turned that inside out on him, and how he went from that and transitioned into multifamily, raising capital while still losing money. So lots of great nuggets and tidbits in there for those of you out there that are wondering how to raise capital. He gives a lot of great content in this interview. The other thing we talked about was what an entrepreneur is. Are they born or are they bred? He had a really interesting take, including a debate he had with Gino Wickman, who wrote a book about exactly that, whether entrepreneurs can be bred or if they are only born. So he gives his take on that, which I think folks will want to stick around for, especially if you're somebody who's maybe a little bit older, not just starting out in life, but in your 30s or 40s, wife and kids, husband and kids at home, and are thinking about doing something different, becoming an entrepreneur. I think you'll really enjoy that discussion about whether entrepreneurs are born or are bred. He also talks about some of the charitable work he's done in Uganda, some really interesting stuff he does with folks from Ukraine and other countries to really, flex that genuine contribution muscle that we talk about in GoBundance. We talk about why he joined GoBundance, and we even got into a fairly robust discussion about mom jeans. You'll have to check that out. Be sure to subscribe, like this episode, give us a notification, drop a comment with your thoughts on Michael Blanc, his message, what you got from it, top takeaways. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, enjoy this interview with Michael Blanc. Welcome, Michael.
Jamie, it's great to be here.
Awesome to have you. I've been kind of waiting for this one. I'll admit I'm a fan and a GoBundance brother of yours, but still, I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about you, your story, and some of the specifics of your life. So if you're ready, we'll dive right in.
Let's do this.
All right. Well, why don't we start with some backstory? Just kind of give us the 5-10 minute version of you from the beginning to now.
I followed the recipe, Jamie. Like everybody says, go to school, get good grades, and get a good job. I was never surrounded by any kind of entrepreneur as well, so I did that. I did pretty well in school. They came easy to me. I got a job. I didn't know what to do, so I got into computer science. I'm pretty good with math, I guess. So I graduated computer science, and when I got out, I think it was in '92. The job market wasn't that great, so I went to grad school for 2 years. Got a scholarship at College of William & Mary and went there, and then started programming. Spent a couple of years at America Online back in the mid 90s, and then late 90s, with Silicon Valley was taking off. So I said, I need to get me some of that. So I joined a startup in Northern Virginia called Web Methods, and I was a third employee there. And we were in the right place, right time. And within 3 years, we had $200 million in revenue and went public. It was at the time the most successful software IPO of its time, and put a bunch of money in my pocket, which was awesome. And then I just coasted probably from there to 2005, all the fun people left and started own companies. And, there's Michael still going to their job every single day. But my plan was to be the CEO of a software company. So I moved around a little bit. I spent a couple of years in marketing and then a year in sales as well. And then I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in 2004. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Like, it doesn't matter how much you have in your stock portfolio, whatever. It matters how much passive income you have. And I had basically none at all. And I thought I was a pretty smart guy, at the time. And I felt like I was literally such an idiot. So I was like, man, I went back and forth and, hemmed and hawed over this. And like 3 months later, I came home to my wife and declared I had quit my job. And she goes, what? Don't you think you should have maybe consulted me with this? No, I am going to get myself some financial freedom.
Wow.
No discussion I set out, with
wife. Just did it.
No discussion. Well, look, I had money in the bank. Yeah, I mean, if you have money in the bank, you can do whatever you want. So I came home and declared that I'm going to get myself my financial freedom. So I took a stock and option trading class. I hired a guy to help me flip houses. Actually went to an apartment building seminar back in the day. It was, kind of rudimentary, but I just want to get grand exposure to real estate. But my big idea was restaurants. And the reason for that was because I knew some franchisees who were crushing it. And they're like, we're printing money. All you got to do is invest, and you hire a guy who runs all these restaurants, and you count your passive income. I'm like, this is great. That's exactly what I want. So I went all in, though. I bought myself a territory of a franchise, and I went into the restaurant business while doing these other things on the side. And it worked for a good period of time. I was in a state of semi-retirement for about 2.5 years. I met with my guy once a week and flipped the house here and there and felt pretty good about myself, traveled. And then the recession hit. And the recession changed everything because, as you know, restaurants went down. This particular went down because it was a high-end pizza, and after the recession, no one wanted to pay $25 for a very good for you, delicious pizza. They wanted to pay $9.99. They wanted 5 toppings to go along with it. And so the concept never adapted. As a result, our margins eroded until I actually literally started losing money. And I met with my guy, and I was like, dude, I can't pay anymore. And as a result, I started running 6 restaurants. So every day I'm driving to a restaurant almost 45 to an hour, to an hour away from my house. And I put my energy into it, but I was trying to catch a falling knife, and I couldn't change anything. Revenue still went down, expenses went up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing $10,000 a month, $15,000 a month. I'm losing all my cash at this point. I get into debt, right? Cash is gone. Luckily, I had debt left over from the good old days when banks were giving you unsecured lines of credit. Meanwhile, I'm listing these things for sale, but no one wants to buy a restaurant in the recession that's losing money. So I'm, after like 18 months of this, I finally sell the first one for pennies on the dollar cash, fast close. And I finally got out of it. And while this is going on, I got into flipping houses because I flipped 3 houses back before the recession, did pretty good. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get back into real estate. And so I flipped houses and I started raising money. So we were buying 2 houses probably a month. We flipped about 3 dozen houses over a course of 2.5 years. And that's kind of when I remembered my apartment building investing, as one of my wholesalers brought me a 12-unit apartment building in Washington, D.C. So I kind of sort of got into that a little bit on a side thing, and it was a complete nightmare. The first deal was like a nightmare. Finally, after about 15 months, it finally quieted down and stabilized, and I kind of forgot about it as I flip all my houses. And then one day I wake up and I go, Michael, you're kind of insane because you're going after passive income. In flipping houses, there's nothing passive about it. Yes, I have my team. I'm buying stuff sight unseen, but there's nothing passive. I can't take 30 days off or 60 days off like I'm doing now when I want to. You got to be around there. And so I was like, man, I got to solve this. And I was like, why don't I just, instead of flipping them, why don't I just hold a portfolio? And I was like, man, if I want to make like $10,000 passive income, I need like 50 houses. And I was like, I just flipped 3 dozen. That's like, that is insane to me. That isn't. And then meanwhile, my apartment building's like sending me like $1,000 a month. I'm like, oh man, maybe I should just do more of that and less of this, and that's kind of when I started to shift a little bit. And people were coming to me and they were asking me, how did you raise money for the house flips? How'd you do the apartment building deal? The guy at my local RIA asked me to speak on this thing. And I was just really surprised and amazed at the level of interest that people had in all these things. It was like, well, I just did this and did that. And then I finally started blogging about it. And that's when I reached out to Brandon Turner at Bigger Pockets in 2014. I was a weekly blog contributor, and people were asking me questions, and everything changed from that point forward. I put out my syndicate deal analyzer where people used to analyze deals with, and I created a course, and I continued to blog. And, what I learned late in life is I love to teach. I'm a natural teacher. And when I'm teaching, so when I figure something out, I love to talk about it. I like to create a step-by-step process on how to do it. And it really lit me up. And at the same time, I was generating deals and getting investors from this activity. So I finally extricated myself out of the restaurants barely by the skin of my teeth, and then started shifting into multifamily. And here we are.
That's quite the story. That's a pretty impressive story. There's a few things that jumped out at me. You've always had a mindset around being passive. Like the first thing you mentioned in your story was finding people. I went to this course and I learned how to do this with options trading. I bought restaurants and hired a guy, right? And then the moment that you went into the real estate realm later, you immediately went to, okay, how do I make this completely passive? Where does that come from? Where did you learn this concept of passivity, and how do you bring people in like that? What are some tips or tricks that you use to find the right people to run your businesses for you?
The idea really came from Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like I said, I've never heard anything like it before, and then, shortly thereafter I read The 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And I was like, it was like you discover like another universe, like a parallel universe. in which in one universe, passive income doesn't exist, and the other one there is. And you're like, whoa, it's like Matrix, like seeing the numbers all of a sudden. You're like, what in the world? And I just became a student of passive income. The problem is I've really failed miserably at it. I pursued certain activities that either outright failed or they generated income, but they weren't really passive. In other words, I wasn't really clear. It sounds like I'm a genius now, but it took me 10 years to figure this out, Jamie, that I wasn't clear about what I wanted. I thought I wanted to be a real estate investor because that's what Robert talks about. But a house flipper or a wholesaler is not actually someone that generates passive income, right? When you stop buying, fixing, and selling houses, your money stops. And so I thought I wanted something, but I really wanted something. It took me a long time to figure that out. So I think a lot of people make this mistake. They think they want something, and then they run up the ladder of success. And then after several years, they get to the top and they look around and they realize that the ladder is up against the wrong wall. That's kind of what I was. I got really good at flipping houses, and so the passive income, the reason I like multifamily specifically, the same thing applies to mobile home parks and self-storage, is that you have the passivity built into it as a model. You have a professional property manager. I mean, what other business can you hire a professional manager? Well, if I have a hair salon, I'm not hiring a professional management company to hire my hair salons. I'm going to do it myself. Even from mobile home parks, the people are very successful. They self-manage. You can't just hire your local professional manager and have them run your mobile home park. So I love that part of it. And that was a missing piece. If I could just outsource the entire thing to somebody else, that's the passivity I was looking for. But even having a team in place on the house flipping side, I never got to that point. The only people who get to that point is people who build up a significant scale and those who also build a property management company at the same time. Those people have been able to figure it out, but they're few and far between. It's not really a model I would advocate. It takes way too long to get there.
Makes sense. You went through all of that. You lost the restaurants. You had to sell them for pennies on the dollar, as you mentioned, and then later got into real estate investing and started raising capital. Was there any challenge, or what was the challenge, if any, in sort of having this, I don't want to say, this failure on your resume, but you had your businesses kind of not your business anymore. Were those questions that came up from those you were raising capital from, or did people sort of say, hey, we all went through something, it was a recession, we get it, we understand your integrity? Can you talk about maybe that pivot to capital raising now that you're out of one business and into another, and how you did that?
Yeah, I mean, they were happening concurrently. So the loss was happening while I was raising capital. And so I had actually not officially lost any money. I kind of pride myself on never having lost my investors any money on the real estate side, which is true. But I did lose money for my 4 investors on the restaurant side. And there was just the loss was absolute. And there was no way to overcome that. The way I position it now is it's almost a strength for me, because I tell people that if someone has never lost money before, they don't know what it's like to live under that kind of stress, that strain for long periods of time when things are not going well. Because when your things are not going well and you're losing money and you're writing checks, it is a very stressful environment. And someone who's never been through that before may not be able to handle it emotionally. They may start retreating or become depressed, or they may run, or they may make difficult decisions, versus someone who's been through there and have the ability to remain calm even though there's something bad going on right now. So I have since then positioned that when people have asked money, I said, yes, I have. And let me tell you why it's made me a stronger person, and why you should look for operators who have lost money before. So I've kind of flipped it a little bit, and it's probably true. It's probably true. And everything I've said doesn't take away how painful it was, though.
Yeah. But you're right. You're battle worn, right? You've gone through something. You're not just it's not all sunshine and roses. You know what it is to kind of go through those losses, the feeling, and how to come back from it. So I think that's a great point, a great reframe of what that takes. You were, if I have this calculator right, you were in your 30s. I don't know if early to mid 30s when you reread Rich Dad Poor Dad. And kind of had this epiphany around passive income. There are a lot of people that reach that point in life. They're in their 30s. Maybe they're either lacking fulfillment, or they discover a way that they never understood to live. You said it. You weren't around entrepreneurs, right, growing up. And suddenly now you're in this world and you've learned about this passive income thing and you're taking action. Is there any advice you would give somebody listening that's maybe 34, 35, 36 years old, who's understanding these concepts more recently, who's kind of getting into the idea of building a passive income structure for themselves in a different way of living, kind of what we do in GoBundance, the horizontal income structure? Is there any advice you'd give to somebody who maybe feels a little bit hesitant about, I'm married, I've got 3 kids, I've got a mortgage, how do I all of a sudden pick up and slide over into this passive income realm? I get it. I love the concept, but the action or putting it in action is the part I struggle with. Any advice you'd give that person?
Yeah, the first one is a level of awareness. And I got to say, I probably drifted through the majority of my life up until that point. And I did not know I was an entrepreneur at heart. But when I read that book, some things started becoming more obvious, the things that I had done kind of unconsciously. The first one is raising a level of awareness. What do you want in life and what don't you want in life? Like for me, my next path would have been to go into another software startup. And software startups are a lot of work. You're working 60 plus hours, you're working for less pay because you're getting equity. But the probability of an exit, either an IPO or sale, are just remote for software startups. And I didn't want to spend another 10 years doing that. So to me, I was like, what am I going to do? And so me, passive income was a way out. And in fact, typically people in their mid 30s are the ones who come to me for, how do I get into this investing stuff, for the same exact reason. They've been working for 15, 20 years. And they're like, I cannot see myself doing this for another 15, 20 years. I'm missing my kids grow up, and this is no longer acceptable to me. And when someone comes to the point where it's no longer acceptable to them, they start looking for solutions. And that's the biggest thing, is like, what is your why, really? Why do you want these things? If you say your goal is to make another $10,000 and that's all there is, it's a pretty weak why. Why do you want to make $10,000 per month? And it better be more than about money. And it probably should be more than just about you as well. That was my fatal flaw in the restaurant. I wanted a certain amount of passive income. It was purely financial. I had not really thought through why that's an important thing. I had no mission behind me. It was yes, okay, fine. I was providing for my family, but really I just wanted to be in a state of semi-retirement so I never have to work again. That's an awful reason, awful reason. So what is your why, really? And what is the impact if you fail, right? If your impact that you fail is just go back to your job or nothing happens, it's not a very strong why. What I love about this business and multifamily specifically is that you can do it on the side, right? So someone thinking, hey, I want to quit my law practice or my medical, whatever it is, you do it on the side. It's something you can do on the side. It's very difficult to start any other business on the side. You can do it with this one here. And the barrier to entry into this particular startup is lower than almost any other business I can think of, for a variety of different reasons. Number one is financing is plentiful and cheap, right? No other business can you get bank financing 4% non-recourse. So, try to get that for a restaurant or a nightclub or a software company. Like, it just doesn't exist. Yeah. Number two, I can hire a professional manager who has so much experience that they will easily, make up for your lack of experience. And again, I can't find that anywhere else. Number three, I don't need a 100-person company to have a really meaningful company. We're running a 2,200 unit apartment building portfolio with, 5 people, 6 people, right? So it's not a huge company that make a huge difference. So the level of complexity is a lot lower than almost any other company. Therefore, this is open to a whole lot more people than who would even consider doing a startup, right? The barrier to entry is a lot lower, and you can do it on the side.
How do you find deals in this market? That's probably a question you get asked every day. But are the tried and true methods still what you would say are working? Is it hitting the streets, networking with brokers, all of that stuff? But in your specific space, or if you're in a self-storage or mobile home park business or whatever it is, do you have any thoughts, advice in this market in particular? Kind of hot, expensive, low cap rate. How you find deal flow still?
Yeah. In the house flipping days, it was all about direct marketing, right? It was around postcards, bandit signs, that kind of stuff. Maybe even SEO if you're advanced. Mobile home parks, because a lot of them are self-managed, a lot of direct mail works really well. But that does not translate to multifamily. And I think the reason for that is a lot of them are held by corporations with layers of gatekeepers and multiple partners. So really the number one to find deals in this market, and it's been like this, it's been true like this for a long time, is through brokers. And what's happening, and this is not a new thing. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, doesn't really matter. It's all due to relationships with brokers. And, nearly half or over half of the deals really are off-market or semi-off-market deals that come directly from your relationship with brokers. Even if you get into a competitive situation where you're in a best and final, again, your relationship with your broker, it can make the difference. We've acquired assets, $600,000 less than another buyer because our broker put a good word in for us. So the broker relationship is absolutely key when you become responsive to when someone, a broker sends you a deal, you become responsive and tell them why or why not the deal works for them. You stay in touch with them. Maybe you send them a useful report every once in a while, or a blog post or a news article of some sort. You hop on a plane and meet with them before you have a deal under contract. All those things sets you apart. And the more they get to know what kind of deals you're looking for, the more they're going to call you when they get a deal like that, because they want to be as efficient as possible. If they don't have to list a deal and parade 20 buyers through there and do a best and final, which is a lot of work. And also a lot of sellers don't want that either. They don't want to deal with 20 buyers. They want to say, hey, I want you to find me a reliable buyer and I want 10 million. I don't need 11 or 12. I need 10, but I need it quiet. I need it fast and reliable. Right? Don't give me any kind of clowns who are going to retrade at me at the last minute. And the broker goes through, okay, this location, this kind of asset, this price point. Oh, who do I call? And it may be you, right? And that's how it happens. It's been like that for a long time. And even to this day, that's how people are getting deals.
Lean on the broker. That makes perfect sense. Two last questions, just based on some of the stuff that you talked about that I thought was really, really interesting and powerful. One is, you talked about developing your mission or your why, and that being kind of the compelling reason for you to kind of take the action that you've taken. What I heard from you is that you are somebody, and correct me if I'm wrong, who takes action and kind of figures things out along the way, which is what a lot of entrepreneurs do out there, right? You just sort of, we call it ready, fire, aim in the emerge and ascend groups. So, is that your advice, or how would you give counsel to somebody who's saying, yeah, I get what you're saying. It can't be about the money. It can't be just about me. It's got to be a bigger reason. I just don't know what that is. Any tips or advice that you would give, or from your experience, on how to develop that why, that compelling reason, that mission?
That's a very personal question. I think I can't tell you exactly how to do it. I just know it's very important. To me, that was a fundamental shift from the restaurant days, where it was really about me. It really was. And when I was thinking, what should my next phase of my life be, I got the very strong sensation that I was to share my successes and failures and my misguided journey to financial freedom with other people. And so, therefore, my mission is to help people become financially free to the end where we can make a difference together. It's very difficult to make a difference and live a life of significance if you're working 60 plus hours a day. You come home, put the kids to bed, and you've just you crash exhausted. And then on the weekends you're doing errands and stuff like that. And how can you live a life of purpose, which may or may not generate income, in an environment like that? It's very difficult. On the other end, the people who develop financial freedom have now this freedom to think about what else is there in life. And most of them gravitate towards serving other people in some way. Therefore, one person who becomes financially free can impact dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of people in some positive way. So financial freedom is a very leveraged state of being, because it never ends there. And so that's really what's driving me, is I want to make sure that I reach more people who want to quit their jobs and they have real estate on their brain. I want to talk to them, because most of them are thinking single family house investing of some sort. And the truth is, very, very, very few actually quit their jobs with it. And everybody else quietly does it with apartment buildings. And we have a way of doing it, even though you may not have any experience at all, and you may not have enough money to buy a building. And both of those are possible, and they're possible within a very short period of time. So that's kind of when I started thinking about others in some way by blogging. Terrible business plan. I mean, when you monetize a blog, 3 years, 4 years, maybe, if your list is big enough. So the business plan kind of really sucked, but something shifted. I had a similar conversation with Damian Lupo recently, where he lost more money than I did. And he came to he was forced to the same conclusion. And when he came out of his dark place, he also came out with a mission, and everything kind of changed from there. And it wasn't the money that's driving, it's something else. Now, the money typically flows from afterwards, just without even trying, when you're serving people, but it cannot be the number one driver.
That was an excellent answer. I think you're right. Very personal, for the individual, but I love your point about contribution being at the heart of that for you. And I think that's a great tip for all of us. So I appreciate you saying that. The second thing was on your my last question before we kind of get into the one sheet portion. It was around your take on entrepreneurship. You mentioned that you realized later that you actually were an entrepreneur. And there's some discussion about, are entrepreneurs made, or are they born, and all of that stuff. I guess the core of the question I'm asking is, what are your thoughts on that? Was it that you became an entrepreneur? You always were entrepreneurial? Can they be made? Are they born? Can people become entrepreneurs, or is it kind of reserved for a certain genome that you get when you're born, when you come out of your mother's womb. Your thoughts,
Yeah,
just your opinion.
You may be referring to Gino Wickman in his book, The Entrepreneurial Leap. I had him on the podcast, and I had a very fun discussion with Gino because he argues that entrepreneurs are born, not made. And I enthusiastically disagreed with him. However, his definition of entrepreneur is a little bit different than my definition of entrepreneur. His definition of entrepreneur is you're building 100+ person business. And how are you wired to do that? I would say, my gosh, well, if you put it that way, and you look at the characteristics in his book, I was like, my gosh, you're right. Not everybody is wired like that. And can you acquire these traits? Maybe not. However, the good news is that with real estate, with multifamily, or any kind of real estate like that, you don't need all these attributes for the reasons I just mentioned. It's a lot easier to get into that business. And we discussed this a little bit, and he actually agreed that, yeah, gosh, because he knew a little something about real estate. He goes, you're right. The barrier to entry to real estate is a lot lower than if you want to build a multi-million-dollar, company built on employees. So, can you? I can't answer that question definitively. I haven't had the study that Gino has. All I can observe is that people who get into this business, who do their first deal and then quit their job, are from all over the place. They are, on the one hand, analytical people. Maybe they're more they're engineers of some sort. They love numbers. They're detail oriented, but they're more introverted, right? They're in the game. Then you have the more extroverted, the networking people, where the sight of a spreadsheet makes them break out in a cold sweat. Well, they somehow are in general partners in these deals, and it's because of the nature is joint venturing in this business. It's very, very rare that you have one syndicator. Very rare. It used to be that case maybe 10 years ago, but right now it's typically two, at least two, and it usually breaks up in this way. Therefore, I don't need to be both the introvert, detail-oriented person and the extrovert capital raiser. No, I can focus on what I do well, which is numbers and detail-oriented. I'm very organized, but I need that person that can talk to investors. That's okay. Let's put them together. And now I have a very powerful partnership. So now both are in the game.
Great answer. No, I like that. It's a great point. If you're defining it in that way, that's a very specific skill set. I was actually talking to two guys yesterday who are partners, and they're both very, very successful men. One is exactly what you described. He's like, I'm not building 100-person teams, but he can. So I partnered with him, and he's building all the operational stuff, and I'm out in front doing what he doesn't like doing, which is pressing the flesh and enjoying the interactions and all of that stuff. So great point. Now, that's a debate that's been out there for a bit. So very cool. All right. Well, we will dive into the one sheet. If you're ready, we'll go pillar by pillar and just sort of break you down a bit. You ready to go?
Let's break me down.
Let's break you down. We're going to start with our first pillar around horizontal income. Let's talk about, the number of lines of income you have. You mentioned 2,200 apartment units. You've got the coaching, but where is your income coming from? How many lines of business do you have right now that's bringing in income for you?
I would say there's maybe three. So there's and two of them are real estate related. And the first one is kind of the passive income of real estate. So I also invest in my own deals. And so that's pure, class A real estate income. And then there's the class B shares, which is coming from the general partnership. So this is the carried interest you get from equity, and the acquisition fees, et cetera. And that is a little bit more active. Though our investment firm is called Nighthawk Equity. So at this point, we have a pretty mature team there. With 3 partners and 3 full-time employees. So I consider part of that as active income. And then the rest is the educational business, right? So the educational business, I'm both an officer, but I'm also an owner as well. So I count some of that as passive and some of it as active. If I were to replace myself, for example, and I'm working on removing myself, a little bit farther from day-to-day operations, introducing new voices and faces into the podcast and YouTube and things of that nature, so that I can actually pull back a little bit. And it might take me a year or a little bit longer to do that. But once I do that, if I replace myself as a CEO, for example, then I should still be able to earn the money from the business as a owner. And so I count that part of it as passive.
That makes sense. In the real estate business in Nighthawk, how many hours a week do you think you're putting in right now, if you could even quantify that, maybe on an average? So you're a general partner, which kind of gives the active vibe, but it sounds like you've structured your team so that you can be somewhat passive and they do a great job for you. So how much time do you actually have to put in right now as a general partner in the real estate business?
It depends, but it's probably shockingly low. I'd say maybe 5 or 6 hours, unless I'm doing a site visit, which might take 2 days to do. Sure. But like I said, I have 2 partners. I have a president And then I have someone who runs acquisitions. So he does a lot more. He's like my co-host, Garrett Lynch, and then Drew Niffen is our president. We have a full-time asset manager. We have a full-time investor relations person and a full-time construction manager. And then we have also have an assistant. So I provide strategic direction. I also am really responsible for the promotion and marketing of Nighthawk using our platform. So I guess if you count the podcast, maybe it's 6 hours a week. But really, I got to make sure that our reputation is intact and that people know about us. And some of the marketing, maybe it's a little more than that. Some of the marketing overlaps. If strict Nighthawk, maybe 5 or 6 hours, but a good number of the marketing we do is aimed at passive investors and educating them and bringing more of them in. So it might be a little bit more like 10 at the end of the day.
Makes sense. No, it's excellent that you're trusting people, right? You are a team builder. That's what I've gotten, at least from the first part of this interview. The first thought you have is who, not how. We always talk about that, the Ben Hardy book that he put out. So you're always thinking in those terms, and you got the right people in place to run things. On the brand side of things, you mentioned you're bringing in new faces, new content from other folks, other content creators. How sensitive are you to you're the brand, right? So, how do you do that, I guess, or how sensitive do you have to be to, okay, it's Michael Blanc, but it's not Michael Blanc all the time now. Is that a slow process, or is it just sort of, hey, at some point, rip the carpet out and here's some new faces for you?
For me, it's a slow process, right? It's been me for so long and people are used to me. My first exposure to this problem was when I stopped to no longer coach people myself. This was several years ago when we got a lot of great demand, and that was great. I didn't have the time to coach everybody. So I was like, my gosh, I got to bring in a coach. I got to hire someone. Well, how do I hire someone who follows my process, who's aligned with us philosophically, and I finally found 2 of them who came on board. Brad Tasha, who is one of them, and Drew Niffen, who's now a president of Nighthawk. But in general, when you talk about bringing on any employee of any strategic importance, including a podcast host or someone on YouTube or anyone like that, how do you align with them philosophically from a values perspective, right? So if my mission is financial freedom for people, real estate, can I find someone who shares my passion, right? Because if they don't share my passion, you're going to sense that in the content that we put out. It's all of a sudden it starts becoming about something else. That's a problem, right? So to answer your other question, it's a slow process for me. I watch people. How do they behave? What do they say without me telling them what to say, kind of naturally? Sure. And then I might tap them on the shoulder. Hey, you want to come on the podcast? Do you want to do a YouTube video together? And so it's a very slow process in that way.
It's funny. A friend of mine up in Canada, now that you mentioned this, was talking about a study they did on a cereal brand up there. I'm going to butcher it, so apologies to my Canadian friends. Call it 2 characters named like Petey and Weedy or something like that, right? They were on a box and they were right in the middle of the box for years and years. And over time, they moved that image of the 2 characters kind of smaller into the corner of the box. Nice. And then eventually they went to the side of the box and then eventually off the box. And the study was done to show how they progressively reduced the image, the brand image, but maintained and actually increased revenue still because the brand was being built without the need for a central figure. So it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing.
I love that analogy. That's a great analogy. Yeah. So right. Make it smaller, and that's exactly right. And that's what we have to do slowly, but nevertheless intentionally.
Yeah, but to your point, it comes from a place of contribution, and what you're doing is looking for, like-minded, like-valued people that are going to bring great content to your team, to the people that follow and the people that patronize your content. I think that's smart. I think that just gives more voices to it. In fact, it's the ultimate in checking your ego, because you could easily say, hey, it's me. It's got to be me. Only my voice matters. They need me. And it's like, you know what? No, they need alternative perspectives within the value system that I created. So kudos to you for that. That's amazing. So good luck as you make that more and more horizontal. Let's talk about your age-defying health pillar. So let's talk weight and body fat. You look like a pretty fit dude. What's your body weight and body fat percentage right now?
Yeah, so I weigh 185 pounds. If I use and I'm 6'1", and if I use an online calculator, it shows that I have 24% body fat, even though some people tell me that appears to be high. But I'm not making a science project out of it. I'm just using an online calculator. Though 24 is a single percent below obese, apparently, according to this calculator. But I don't think I'm that, but that's what the calculator tells me. My GB9, the last time I did is 122, okay. And my blood pressure is just it's low. It always has been. It's 120 over 80. The reason I say the last time is because I did actually have a heart attack about almost a year ago, July 28th, right after I joined GoBundance, actually, which ruined my chances of going to the first meeting, unfortunately. But, my doctor told me later that my probability of heart attack was 3.1%. And, because my blood pressure is low. My resting heart rate a couple of days ago was like 51. She goes, man, I said, that's because I'm a performance athlete, in which I'm not. I mean, I exercise, but I have a low resting heart rate. My cholesterol is on the higher end of normal. It's not like low, but I'm not really a candidate. So I got those genetics from my father who had a heart attack when he was 48. But, he also wasn't exercising and eating right at the time, right? And so he gave me, it was 100% blockage of the widowmaker, the main artery. And so at the same time, while I got those genes, he also gave me the plan B, which was a fourth artery, which apparently only 1% of people on earth have, including my dad, because I asked him about it later. He goes, oh yeah, I remember something. There was some fourth artery. So that saved me.
So yeah, this is my own ignorance on this. So you're saying that the widowmaker, the artery, that if it's clogged, you're probably going to die, right?
Yeah.
If you have a heart attack. The only reason, so your father gifted you, quote unquote, with that, but also gifted you with a workaround, essentially.
That's right, exactly. So the heart just started pumping more blood through the fourth artery, and
that's crazy.
So
that's crazy. Wow, that's good. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear of that defect, if you will. That's good for you. And I do remember when you had first joined. Of course, I recognize the name. I'm in the multifamily space myself. I'm like, okay, I've heard the podcast, and you mentioned Brad Taish is a common friend, Phil Capron, some other guys that I know you work with. And I saw the post very quickly after you joined. Like, oh boy, I'm glad you're okay. But to your point, to look at you, you're a fairly lean guy. You're tall. You're thin. You're not that. You're late 40s, early 50s. You don't look like the kind of guy that would be a candidate for a heart attack. So all of that is to say, I'm glad that you've recovered the way you have. Is there any modifications you've made to diet? How is diet today? What does that look like?
Not really. I mean, not really. I just take a bunch of medicine tablets right now, blood thinner, which gives me black and blue spots when I bump into things and my kids punch me. Hey, Dad, so I have black and blue spots all over myself. But not really. I just have to make sure I have to continue taking these medications and continue exercising, which is what I'm doing and eating right. So it wasn't really an environmental thing. That's what I'm being told. I'm sitting there laying in the hospital bed. I'm trying to figure out if I need to reevaluate my life. So I really thought about that a lot. And I just felt that I was already doing what I was supposed to be doing beforehand. I mean, I should come out a changed person, right? I had a near-death experience. Something should change.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
And I was like, man, right. but I've gotten a lot more intentional over the last 5 to 7 years. After realizing that I have been drifting through majority of my life, I've gotten a lot more intentional implementing the Miracle Morning and really thinking about it and designing my life and kind of the way I wanted. So I just didn't feel like I needed to make you're always improving. You're always looking for a better version of yourself. But I felt I was in the right place and I was already doing what I was called to do. So that's how I came out of that.
Makes sense. What does exercise look like now? What do you focus on cardio? Do you do more weights, a little bit of both?
I work out 3 times a week, and I do some resistance training, and then I do some cardio. I run, or I'm on the rower or something like that. I get about 30 minutes in. I can do that reliably. If I go for an hour, I start looking for excuses to get out of it.
Gotcha. Let's talk about your family a little bit, the authentic relationship pillar. So married, you mentioned kids. Give us a little bit more about your wife and kids.
Yeah. So wife, 4 kids. They're 13 and 19, 2 boys, 2 girls.
13. So real quick, you said 4 kids?
Yeah, 4 kids. Yeah. My wife runs that side of the business. We homeschool. When I say we, my wife does most of that, though I kind of own the financial education part of it. But yeah, we've homeschooled our kids for probably 9 years now.
Gotcha. You said though, age 13 and 19?
13 to 19. So roughly 13, 15, 17, 19.
Gotcha. Boys, I thought it was 2 sets of twins that you were hiding in there or something. Like,
yeah.
Only twins? Just kind of
2 sets of twins. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So 13 to 19. And you mentioned your homeschooling. That's interesting. And you've done that for, you said, the last 8 years. What was that decision like? I'm kind of curious.
It really came from my wife. She came home one day and she goes, I just ran into a homeschooling family. That was pretty interesting. And I just, thought homeschoolers are, these socially awkward people that they leave locked up in a room somewhere. But when I finally met some of them, what struck me was how they engaged with adults. Like they would come up and they would speak to adults and look in the eye and shake your hand. And I was like, what? And at that point, I started paying a little more attention to it. And it was just, my stereotype was all pure ignorance, really, because homeschooling is amazing, right? If you're a little slow learner, you spend more time until you learn it. If you're a faster learner, you get through it more, and you have some say over the curriculum, right? And you can do it sitting by your pool or under a tree or in your room. You can do it in the morning and do it in the afternoon. So the flexibility, it really what it does is it teaches you time management, involves you in your own education, and really develops a love for learning, which school doesn't. It kind of beats it out of you. You're like, I'm going to read another book. I'm not reading a book. The teachers make me read a book. So why would I read a book on my own? Right. And so homeschooling changes all that.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, we've had a lot of debate. We have a kindergartner and a 3-year-old, and we've recently moved him into sort of an Acton academy, the older of the two. Somewhere between homeschooling and traditional schooling. So we're trying to figure out the best way to move forward with education for them. So I'm always interested to hear how other guys have sort of filtered that. What's your life happiness index today?
So it's an 8.8. Which sounds pretty high, but I had this discussion with my GoPod a little while back where we kind of rated ourselves like 6.5 and what's one category, song and dance or something like that, and I rated myself like a 1 or 2 because I don't sing or dance. And we had a discussion about but how do you feel about that? Do you feel like there's a problem in your life? I'm like, no, I don't want to start to sing and dance. So we talked about it. We debated this for a long period of time, and we're like, well, if you're happy with something, then why don't you give yourself a 10? We're like, well, shoot, then I'm rating myself song and dance 10 because I'm happy with my inability to sing or dance. Mm-hmm. And so I redid the whole thing, and as a result, it changed a little bit, and so therefore the resulting thing is 8.8. There's only a couple places I know you're going to ask me about it. It's like what are my low ones, and one I rated myself low under romance. We'll talk about that in a separate episode, Jamie.
Yes,
and also travel. And travel is travel, of course, is an obvious one because our family loves to travel. We had a round the world trip planned for last August, 60 days. I pre-recorded all my podcasts, so I didn't have to record anyone's for 60 days. It took a long time to get this done. Of course, COVID changed that. So I rated myself a very low 4 on that one. And romance only because I just think I can do better. I can do better in that department, and then I snap at my wife sometimes, or I cut her off when she's trying to tell me something because I'm, of course, busy. I'll sit because I work at home. She sits there and she walks up. She wants to share something. Yeah. And I'm like, how long is this going to take? And then that's the end of it. And it's like, and you do that because you're taking a person for granted. And I just got to improve in that part of my life.
No, that's fair. I think we're all guilty of that to some extent. We all run into that moment of, it's a great point. Taking somebody for granted, like your wife, like your kids or whatever. And sometimes, hopefully, you look up and it could be too late. So it's smart that you're thinking about that now. I do the same. I try to always be mindful of that as I move through life. So let's talk about genuine contribution. If do you target a percentage to give or a specific amount or certain charities or certain areas that you like to specifically contribute? Just kind of give us an idea of your contribution philosophy.
Yeah, so I mean, I have always tried to tithe, right? And when I got into GoBundance, their definition of tithing was a little different because you have it as a percentage of total income. I had it basically of what I paid myself, right? So you have total income, and then you take some of that and you leave it in the business because you're going to invest with it. You're going to do anything with it, or you let it let it sit in the court. And really only what I paid in other words, how much of that was I using? So I felt pretty good with myself until I got into GoBundance. I was like, daggone it, I'm not giving enough. So I've been challenging myself to give more. And, there's a couple things, we give to our church, and my wife loves to host teenagers, orphans out of the Ukraine and Latvia. And we've done that now 3 times. COVID kind of put a stop to that, but we're doing it again in the summer. So in the summer, we're going to have a 13-year-old with us from the Ukraine. And that's going to be kind of cool. So that's kind of her thing. She really enjoys that. I think she would probably adopt another 10 kids if she could. I said, 4 is pretty much all we can handle right now. She disagrees. She'll probably eventually maybe win. So I might have more kids. Who knows? My passion is, helping a mission in Uganda. And the reason is because I met a guy 12 years ago, unbelievable guy. His name is Ronald Kaluuya. And he was a bookkeeper by trade. And he came over here and he wanted to get educated. He wanted to get a master's in the States so he can go back and help his people. And I looked him in the eye and I could tell he was serious. And since then, 10 years ago, went back and started this nonprofit. And he picked such a remote part of Uganda where there's no running water, no medicine, no nothing. There's like permanent camping over there. And this is where he wanted to make a difference, where his mother grew up. And it's an unbelievably poor place. I mean, and so we're really focused on teaching people how to become self-sufficient there so that they can actually start bettering themselves, because they're so far below the rung of poverty, they can't actually help themselves. They literally can't help themselves. And, they don't also know there's a God out there who loves them. And so that's kind of an important thing to say as well. And so I've been supporting him. So I've been to Uganda twice, and that's where the majority of what I contribute. I gave away about $55,000 last year, which was the most I've ever done. And this year my goal is 85,000.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And difference making. And again, goes back to the why you talked about. You've got a strong why behind all of the things that you contribute to: time, money, or energy. So love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We're going to jump over to extreme accountability. Who is in your GoPod currently?
So we got Rick Hale, Jason Griggs, Jim Campbell, and Mark Ugetta. So it's a great group of guys. And there's a high degree of accountability there. If someone misses or is late, they're not gonna hear the end of that. So I'm enjoying that group of men.
That's awesome. Yeah, one guy I know at least owns a ski mountain in there, which is always
He does. He really does.
How often do you meet, and what is the current discussion right now in the group?
Yeah, so we meet every other week. It used to be when I got on there, it was once a month, and I let it go for a couple times, and now I'm basically taking control of the GoPod. And so we're not meeting every other week. I just didn't think there was enough continuity, and the guys agreed. So every other week seems to be a good compromise. And we have discussed a variety of things. Rick's writing a book, and we talked about succession planning in our companies and estate planning. How do we set our families up for generational wealth? And it's not just about setting up trusts. It's how do you talk to kids about money? How do you educate them about money? How do you empower them to make mistakes, and so that they're able to become stewards of this money, right? Because lottery winners, they basically lose everything in about 18 months. And how do we prevent that from 2 or 3 generations from now? The wealth that we're creating is all gone. What do we do to ensure that it stays there and yes, supports the family, but how do we then use that to make a difference in the world? So that's a pretty cool topic. That's I'm interested in as well.
That's a great use of a community like that. Your GoPod guys that are playing at that level and thinking in the same way. So that's really cool to hear. What is your biggest business and personal goal over the next 12 months?
So my personal goal is to get that round the world trip rescheduled again. Oh man! Now the trick is finding the energy to do that, because it took so much energy to do that, and it took energy to unwind it all. Okay. That's my biggest personal goal, and then my biggest business goal is to hire an integrator, or whatever you call that person, a CEO, a president, someone who can take over the large parts of the operations of the educational side of the business.
I like it. That's amazing. Yeah. And we talk a lot about that who we talked about it before. And it sounds like, again, from at least what I hear of your story, that's sort of a skill you have. So I'm sure you'll have no issue finding the right person in that regard. I have confidence in you for whatever that's worth. Let's talk about bucket list adventures. You talked about this upcoming round the world trip. Have you been to a GoBundance trip yet? Sounds like no. Or are you planning to go to one soon?
Yeah, so I've been to the GoBundance trip, the one for the 50 and over. And since I just turned 50 in January, I was the youngest guy there, but nevertheless I was there, and a couple of guys in the GoPod were there, so I really enjoyed that. Very cool. And I do plan on being in Steamboat as well.
Very nice. I'll see you there. That'll be great. What other future greatest hits do you have besides the around the world trip? Anything else you want to highlight?
Yeah, Steamboat's one of them. Our annual conference is called Dealmaker Live. It's in Dallas, July 16 to 17. So it's a highlight. Really looking forward to that. And it'll be in person. It's going to have a live stream component as well. So it's going to be doggone complicated and expensive to pull off, but it's going to be awesome. And then I will spend 9-10 days with the real estate guys in Belize in a couple of weeks. So those are my upcoming highlights, which are all, of course, all related around travel. So only one of them, though, is well, two of them are going to be my kids, my family, because there'll be a Dealmaker Live, and I'm trying to get them to join me to the GoBundance, the fan buns and stuff that we're doing there. So I'm still working on that.
I like it. Let me ask you this before we go to our final question from the GoBundance card game. You're connected to a lot of people in your space. You mentioned the real estate guys and other groups. I mean, you're well known in the multifamily space, and I'm sure are part of many communities. What drew you to GoBundance? Why join GoBundance? I'm just kind of curious what your take was on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great organizations out there that I looked at. I think I resonate with the people that I spoke to. It's about, a holistic approach to success in life. It's not one size. It's not financial or business. It's, it's all your pillars that you have. I thought that was really cool. And then that you have programming for the family, for the wives and for the kids. The kids sometimes they sometimes have a hard time finding friends. It's a bit like, I have trouble finding friends because, your neighbor isn't necessarily going to be the person that you want to hang out with, right? Because there's certain things you want to talk about. I want to talk about estate planning, generational wealth. I don't necessarily want to talk about sports or politics or your kitchen remodel, right? No offense, but that's not what I'm looking for. And so Sure. It's hard sometimes to find people who are thinking differently from you are. And so I really wanted to expose my entire family to everything. And so you have programming for everybody. And I love that. So I really resonated with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you in the tribe, man. Love having you in here. So, all right, let's go to our GoBundance card game question. And just to let you know, I did change it from the one previously because you kind of answered it already. So I quickly thumbed through and generated a new one here. And I like this question. What is something that is really popular now, but in 5 years, everyone will look back on and be embarrassed by it?
Oh my gosh. Really popular now.
This is a stumper. This is a tough one.
I don't know. I don't know. Trends really come and go. I don't know.
I got one. If you struggle a lot, I can come up with one.
I got a couple. Like torn jeans. That was probably like 5 years ago. Like I'm probably embarrassed now. Like I was embarrassed back then. I'd like to hear yours. The only thing I can think of is, there's a lot of thing about, adjusting for COVID related stuff, a lot of opportunities that are coming around COVID, and people are adjusting their investing strategy or their whatever. And it's like, well, what if it comes back and it's coming back now. Now what's going to happen to your investing strategy, right? But being embarrassed by it, I don't know. Jamie, what do you got?
The only thing, you kind of were in my genre there a moment ago. I think mom jeans. That's like this thing now. Women 17, 22, 23-year-old girls are wearing these mom jeans, and I don't get the fashion. It's like a bag. Whatever. That's just me.
What about stretchy jeans? Are those still in? Because I love stretchy jeans, but I discovered them 10 years late, and I discovered, man, you're great.
I did too. I like them too. If they're out, then I'm out. But and I'm sure people are laughing as I walk by. But yeah, it's a good point. Anything clothing related has to be in there somehow, some way. There's probably some hairdos nowadays, like mine, that are going to be embarrassing in 5 years if they're not already embarrassing. So we'll see. Who knows? But Michael, where can people learn more about you or find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, the podcast is the Apartment Building Investing Podcast. We're actually going to call it the title of this book, which is Financial Freedom with Real Estate Investing. It's an Amazon bestseller. If people are interested in even entertaining the idea of multifamily investing, what it's entailed to get in there. That book is a great segue into that, and as well as the podcast. And you can just Google my name and you'll find it. We have a YouTube channel, we have a podcast, we have a book, we have a blog, and then we have online courses and coaching and live events. So if you're interested in getting into multifamily, either as an active investor or a passive investor, we have resources for both types of people who want to get into multifamily.
Yeah, when I started in multifamily, one of the resources I used was your podcast and a lot of the content that you put out there. I know you have summits and everything else. So personally, I can attest to the quality of what you put out and say thank you to you for putting out what you do, because it was one of the things that helped me, inspire me to get into that passive income realm as you coach to. So appreciate you. Thanks for coming on today. And I'll see you in Steamboat, I guess.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Jamie. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know down in the comments, and make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be informed on the next episode and other content right here on this channel. Thank you.